Welcome. This video is documenting the prediction that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall and severely injure his head on November 27th, 2025, Thanksgiving Day. And it is predicted that the news of this will be first reported on November 28th, 2025, Black Friday. The post date on the social media platform that you are watching this video on proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. The next 18 minutes of this video is an introduction that I am placing at the beginning of about a dozen videos. This introduction regards the prophetic signs that occurred on October 30th and 31st, 2025. If you have already watched this introduction in another video, you can skip ahead no more than 18 minutes from this point of the video. All right, it is predicted that famous singer Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall and severely injure his head on November 27th, 2025, Thanksgiving Day, and it is predicted that the first news of this fall will be reported on November 28th, the following day, Black Friday. This email was composed, as we can see here, on November 15th, prior to these predictions for November 27th and 28th. Prior to October 30th, and October 31st, 2025. It was predicted that Paul Simon would slip and fall and injure his head on October 30th, and it was predicted that the news of this would first be reported on October 31st. God orchestrated a myriad of connections from other prophetic signs in order to confirm this analysis for October 30th and 31st. In other words, these connections from the other prophetic signs were known in advance of October 30th and 31st to be pointing to October 30th and 31st. On October 30th and 31st, we received clear prophetic signs that are related to Paul Simon. October 30th and 31st was a step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date it is predicted that Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head, which is predicted to be on November 27th, 9 + 9 + 9 days after October 31st. First of all, God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, and the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, is the number 9, as from the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. What do I mean by step in the trail of signs? Well, God's prophetic signs, none of them can be properly or fully understood without their context and connections to the other prophetic signs, something that is mostly missed by other people that are interested in God's signs. And this is also why the vast majority of God's signs are completely unknown and missed and are only being talked about on this channel. The reason why God does this is He is able to tell stories through the big picture of signs and interconnected signs that He wouldn't otherwise be able to tell from one single prophetic sign isolated on its own. That's why these signs are not recognized in general by other so-called watchers, and the signs that are recognized are not fully appreciated or understood. The reason why God tells these stories is in order to communicate extremely important information and knowledge that everyone needs to know, that is only being communicated or explained, I should say, on this channel. And for example, there was a tremendous theme that God was using for October 30th and 31st, Halloween, that God didn't, I assume, I can gather, want to use for the final date of Paul Simon's fall and then death. These signs and this theme of Halloween are extremely important, and you will see what I'm talking about when you watch these other videos, including probably this video, because what I'm doing right now is making an introduction to these other videos that predicted October 30th and 31st. In other words, there are about 10 other videos that must be watched, every minute of them. And when the prediction comes to pass, the wise person will recognize that they do need to watch every minute of every video on this channel. When the prediction comes to pass that Paul Simon will fall and hit his head and injure his head on November 27th, and it being reported on November 28th, it will prove all of the analysis for October 30th and 31st, 9 plus 9 plus 9 days ahead of the predicted fall. And the reason why that's important is because this will prove all of the information in these other 10 videos that God was telling through these stories that he designed to lead up to October 30th and 31st. He didn't do this for any reason at all. He did this for extremely important reasons. And so that's the purpose of a step in the trail of signs. It further paints the picture and enables God to tell these stories. And these stories could not be possibly told without these steps that served to connect the other prophetic signs in the big picture web of God's signs. Believe me, I know far better than anyone the purpose for this prediction that is from God. And it is to prove the things that I am saying in these videos, and especially the controversial things that I am saying, which will be proven to be true because they are proven beyond a doubt through God's big picture of signs, which in turn will be proven to be true when this prediction comes to pass. And so hopefully I have made it clear why God did this for October 30th and 31st. In other words, what I'm about to explain in the next couple of minutes is an explanation for the prophetic signs that occurred on October 31st and 30th, and which are these dates that we expected such signs in advance of these dates. And when the prediction comes to pass on November 27th, it will prove that October 30th and 31st were indeed steps in the trail of signs, and therefore all of the analysis for October 30th and 31st that was explained in advance of these dates is 100% correct. To not appreciate this is to miss entirely the point of this prediction that is from God, the point of this video, and the point of the videos on this channel. You might as well turn this video off. If you do not appreciate this, you are wasting your time. Okay, so that's what's going on here. So that's, again, why it is that this video must be watched, and the rest of this video will talk about how God pointed to October 30th and 31st ahead of time, and now you understand why he did this and why it is important that you learn what God did to point to these dates ahead of time. Because what God did to point to these dates ahead of time are the stories that contain the knowledge that you need to know. On October 30th and 31st, we received clear prophetic signs that are related to Paul Simon, as we expected in advance of these dates. October 30th and 31st was a step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date it is predicted Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head, which is predicted to be on November 27th, 9 plus 9 plus 9 days after October 31st. Elvis Presley famously covered Simon's Bridge Over Troubled Water song, and Presley died from the effects of his fall in his mansion when he hit his head on a porcelain bathtub. Most people don't know this, but professionals believe that the true reason for Elvis Presley's death was not him taking drugs, but the drugs were taken to deal with the side effects from the severe head injury he had 10 years earlier in 1967, when he fell in his bathroom and hit his head on his porcelain bathtub and was unconscious for an unknown period of time. This, in turn, caused over the years increasingly severe autoimmune diseases as a result of the brain injury. And that's all related to, guess you know what? The Thing, and we will talk about that in these videos. The thing that causes autoimmune diseases. Now, Paul Simon's best-selling album is titled Graceland. His song Graceland is about his journey with his young son to visit the King of Rock, Elvis Presley, the King of Rock and Roll's mansion, Graceland Mansion, in the 4x4th state. Memphis, Tennessee is named after Memphis, Egypt, and Memphis, Tennessee is located in the area of the country that is nicknamed Little Egypt. Elvis Presley, incidentally, has a hit song named Little Egypt from his 9th soundtrack album, no less. The King of Rock's Graceland Mansion in Memphis is symbolic, and I say that because of the 4x4th state and the number 9, and I'm getting ahead of myself here because God pairs 9 and 44 together. So hold on a second. The King of Rock's Graceland Mansion in Memphis is symbolic of the King of Egypt's palace. And in the Bible, the King of Egypt is a type for the Antichrist king. The Antichrist king, who will reside in the White House mansion that has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, and is located at 4x400 Pennsylvania Avenue. This Antichrist king is the 44th president, and he was inaugurated in the year 09. This is why in his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, God pairs the numbers 9 and 44 together. On October 30th, King Charles, and by the way, in the Bible, the Israelites escaped the persecution from the King of the King of Egypt, and likewise the Pilgrims escaped the persecution from the King of England, which is King Charles. On October 30th, King Charles formally stripped, and Paul Simon sang about the Pilgrims in his song American Tune. On October 30th, King Charles formally, this date that we knew in advance to relate to Paul Simon, who God is using to point to the King of Rock and Roll. Okay, so on October 30th, King Charles formally stripped Prince Andrew of his royal titles. One of the main stories on October 31st, the following day, was the question of what would become of Prince Andrew's mansion. And also on this day, news broke that Prince Andrew had hired 40 prostitutes in 4 days while he was in the royal kingdom of Thailand. 40 prostitutes in 4 days hints at the number 44. In his signs, God pairs the numbers 23 and 44 to confirm his signs and connections. And by the way, this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which he would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9, 23, and 44. And I know these are the numbers because I have been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years. Okay, and so the reason for 23 and 44 is because the 44th president was the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school basketball. And also the thing alters a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes, the mark of the Antichrist. The 44th president is the Antichrist. So in his signs, God pairs the numbers 23 and 44 together to confirm his signs and connections. The news of Prince Andrew's 40 prostitutes in 4 days in the Royal Kingdom of Thailand was exactly 2 times 300 days after Prince William and Prince Harry visited the King of Rock's Graceland estate and mansion in the 4 times 4th state. And again, the news on this day was Prince Andrew's mansion. And exactly 2,300, or 2 times 300, I should say, days prior, the princes visited the King's Graceland mansion in the 4 times 4th state. That's a pairing of 23 and 44. Furthermore, it pairs with the 40 prostitutes in 4 days at the other end of this timeline. Okay, now this 2 times 300 days is the equivalent of exactly 4,200 days. And in Bible prophecy, the period of the Antichrist king's rule is symbolized by 42 months. Also, on October 31st, Trump, God's trumpet for prophetic signs, trumpeted that he had renovated the Lincoln bathroom in the White House mansion that has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms and is located at 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue. President Lincoln was the 4 times 4th president. Also, on October 31st, Trump had an interview in his mansion in the 9 plus 9 plus 9th state, Florida, with CBS for the first time since his $4 times $4 million lawsuit with this news company. That's another pairing of 9 and 44. The 9 plus 9 plus 9th state and the $4 times $4 million lawsuit. These signs on October 31st that hinted at the number 44, again, the 40 prostitutes in 4 days, and the Lincoln bathroom named after the 4 times 4th president in the White House mansion, which has 44 plus 44 rooms and is located at 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue. Okay, these signs on October 31st that hinted at the number 44, including the sign in Trump's mansion in the 9 plus 9 plus 9th state, are 9 plus 9 plus 9 days before Simon is predicted to slip and fall and injure his head in his house or mansion, if you will, on Thanksgiving on November 27th, 2025. The 4 times 4th president formally began the tradition of celebrating Thanksgiving on the 4th Thursday of the month of November. November is Latin for 9. The renovation of the bathroom in the White House mansion that is named after the 4 times 4th president hints at how Elvis died in his bathroom in his Graceland mansion from the effects of the fall that he had in his bathroom in his mansion years earlier. Likewise, Simon, who sang about the Graceland mansion, is predicted to slip and fall and injure his head and ultimately die from his head injury. Okay, I should also add that the Graceland mansion is in the 4 times 4th state. And so the renovation in the bathroom of the White House mansion that is named after the 4 times 4th president hints at how Elvis died in his bathroom in the Graceland mansion in the 4 times 4th state from the effects of the fall he had in his bathroom in his mansion years earlier. Likewise, Simon, who sang about the Graceland mansion, is predicted to slip and fall and injure his head like Elvis did and ultimately die from his head injury. Also on October 31st, Trump, God's trumpet, trumpeted that the U.S. is considering conducting a military raid in support of the persecuted Christians in Nigeria, Africa. Simon's Graceland album was controversial because he visited South Africa during apartheid and he used South African musical influences in his songs on the album. One of the released singles from the album is Under African Skies. This video is documenting the predictions that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall and severely injure his head on October 30th, 2025, and it will first be reported in the news on October 31st, 2025, and it is predicted that he will die from his head injury on November 5th, 2025. It is also predicted in this video, and this video is documenting the prediction, that Michelle Obama will become the president in the election in 2028 on November 7th, and Barack Obama will be her vice president, and they will be inaugurated on January 20th, 2029. It is also predicted and is being documented in this video that Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom will die in a plane crash in St. Louis on August 2nd, 2028. Gavin Newsom at that time will be the Democrat Party nomination, which is why Michelle will be able to step in an emergency as the Democrat Party nomination. All right, welcome. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall and severely injure his head on October 30th, 2025. And it's predicted that the first news of this will be reported the following day on October 31st. It is also predicted that he will die from his head injury on November 5th. Okay, it's also predicted that Michelle Obama will, well, let's see, it's predicted that the 2028 election will, it's predicted that the 2028 referendum will be shoplifted, making Michelle Obama the Queen of America, and her vice president will be Barack Obama. Once she becomes the president, she will step down and Barack will become the president again. And it is also predicted that Trump will be ASSINATED in July of 2028. And that'll all be explained in this video and how these predictions are known ahead of time. And you will be amazed with the profound information that couldn't have been imagined in the brain of a human being. And that'll all be proven when the prediction for Paul Simon comes to pass. He is the first of these predictions. And so when that comes to pass, it'll prove that the information in this video is true. The video you are watching is posted on whatever social media platform you are watching it on prior to October 30th. And videos can't be dated. They can't be dated later after the post date. I don't have any inside connections at the social media platforms in order to adjust dates. Okay, but regardless, the reasons that I'll be explaining will also prove that this is from God and not from the imagination of a human being, because if someone, for example, were to do such a crazy thing, they would have to, I assume, pick or rather create videos for every day from here until Paul Simon dies. But then again, I'm also predicting he will fall. So that's like a non-starter, really. It's one thing to predict the death of an old man, but even that would be crazy, because although he is 84, he could live another 10 years. And so to make videos for every day of the year with reasons for how the prediction is known is ridiculous. But as you will see, the reasons that I will explain could not be concocted by a human being. But also, the timestamp of this email proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time. Okay, August 21st, you can see right here. This date, if you are skeptical, you can email me and I'll forward it to you. Also, the forensic notes PDF document. You can look up what that is for yourself, but it proves that the prediction is being made ahead of time. Okay, so this email is documenting the prediction that singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall and severely injure his head on October 30th, 2025, and then the news of this will first be reported on October 31st. Simon will then die from a head injury on November 5th. Okay, the title here is simply a title because these videos and emails need titles, but as always is the case, this is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. And so the information will be about much more than what you see in the title, because everything is interconnected. That's the nature of God's signs. None of them can be fully or properly understood without their context and connections with the other prophetic signs. This is something that isn't appreciated by most people that desire to watch for God's signs. And this is why they miss the vast majority of God's prophetic signs, which are only being talked about on this channel. Okay. All right, so the following information in this email is by personal notes. Rather than type it out into paragraphs, I will explain these insights in the video, as I will do right now. I don't have time to, on a daily basis, type out a multiple page essay, which is what's required these days as the Lord's signs is being revealed like a fire hose. It's just nonstop. And so I can only keep up with it with the insights that come to me. And fortunately, they come to me really quickly. Thank you to the Holy Spirit for this, because there wouldn't be any time to deliberate and think about these things for days, or let alone one day. They come immediately, pretty much. Not always, but maybe a couple hours later or something, it comes to me what is going on here, or whatever. You know what I'm getting at. So fortunately, and that's the result of having spent from morning until night for more than full-time hours for the last 7 years studying God's big picture of science. So I have the background knowledge in which I am able to identify things really quickly, fortunately. Okay, and as that'll be demonstrated in this video, for example. The Queen's jewels on the Paris River definitely hint at Queen Michelle and hints at the upcoming election in 2028 and how it will be shoplifted. This is a great example. I immediately knew that this sign at the Louvre with the jewels being stolen is all pointing to Queen Michelle. It's a big story that God has been telling for years, including other signs on the Paris River. So I know immediately what's going on. Furthermore, although I didn't know right away, and I knew right away it was about Michelle, but it was later learned, after I already knew it was about Michelle, that the robbers dropped a crown, the Queen's crown. This is really a typo, because it wasn't all the Queen's jewels. There was multiple queens and things like this, and they weren't all crowns, but the crown was dropped, which is huge, prophetically. Anyway, so the Queen's jewels were stolen, multiple queens in history, but in one queen in particular's crown was dropped as the robbers were making a getaway. And that was prophetic, as I'll explain. But it all points to Michelle Obama becoming the Queen of America, and I'll explain how that is too. Well, I'll start explaining, I guess, right now. Because this, what I'm referring to here, is Michelle Obama's autobiography. Her book, Becoming, as in her becoming the Queen or President of America. And I shouldn't say and or, because she will become the dictator and not just a president, or rather, her husband will. Anyway, so she was promoting her book, Becoming, on a cruise, a riverboat cruise, on the Paris River, on the very day and the very time, the exact time, that the Notre Dame Cathedral burned. And Notre Dame is French for Our Lady, which hints at Queen Michelle of America. Not only that, there is a iconic image of her on the boat, the roof of it, with other people as she's promoting her book, but she's sipping a big wine glass, and in the reflection of the wine glass, you can see the fire of the Notre Dame Cathedral. Her boat had to be redirected because of the fire. So she's tied to Notre Dame and this Paris River way back from April 15th, 2019, which incidentally was a date that was recognized that God was pointing to ahead of time. It was recognized ahead of time that God was pointing to this date overwhelmingly. For one thing, it was 6,666 days after a prophetic earthquake in El Salvador, which is Spanish for the Savior. And El Salvador has essentially the exact same land size as the state of Israel. Well, anyway, that date was also, which is how it was recognized in the first place, Nisan 10 in the Hebrew calendar. And Nisan 10 is the day of the triumphal entry of Jesus, the King of the Jews. The Notre Dame Cathedral is known for its facade of kings, or the Gallery of Kings, in which there are 28 statues of ancient Jewish kings from the Bible. And so that's what God was one of the many things that God used this Notre Dame Cathedral for in terms of prophecy and prophetic signs. The Gallery of Kings. And that's why the fire occurred on the day that the King of the Jews officially arrived in Jerusalem, riding on the donkey. Okay, so anyway, so back to what I was saying about Michelle. Her book Becoming was released on this date, November 13th, in 2018. Now, 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6. October 20th, 2025 was the 18th prime number birthday of Kamala Harris. In other words, it was the 6 plus 6 plus 6th prime number birthday of Kamala Harris. Her 61st birthday is the 18th prime number. And the Antichrist, whose number in Bible prophecy is 666, was born in 61 because he is the Antichrist. He was also born in 61, the 6 plus 6 plus 6th prime number, on the 6 times 6 times 6th day of the calendar year, August 4th. Okay, now this is all relevant because, and this was known a long time ago, but now it's more clear as to why her book was released on this date. I always knew it was pointing to the 1113th word in the Hebrew Concordance. But it occurred to me now why, just today, really, although I should have known this before, it's because of the facade of kings. Because this word in the Hebrew Concordance in the Bible, for the Bible, is Belshazzar, who was the last reigning king in ancient Babylon. Which is why she was promoting Becoming, which was released on this date, which hints at Belshazzar, the last king. She was promoting the book Becoming on the day that the cathedral burned, known for its gallery of ancient Jewish kings. It's amazing. And I just figured that out today. And also, speaking of Jesus, the King of the Jews, arriving on Nisan 10, it is believed by many that the Notre Dame Cathedral houses the crown of thorns, which Jesus received shortly after he arrived on the date Nisan 10. It's a crown. The Notre Dame Cathedral, by the way, is on an island in the middle of the Paris River, and the Louvre Museum, the most visited museum in the world, is right on the Paris River. So the crown was dropped, in other words, right near where the crown of thorns is housed in the Notre Dame Cathedral, which is known for its gallery of kings, as in crowns. And incidentally, the gallery of kings is also known for the statues of the kings being beheaded during the French Revolution. In other words, the kings were killed, and so was the King of the Jews. Okay, so now October 19th, which was the day of the heist of the Louvre, is 1,115 days until this election in 2028. We have a pattern here. We have the H 1113, but G 1115 is the word in the Greek concordance for Golgotha, which is where Jesus was crucified in between the two robbers. The robbers dropped the queen's crown. On this date, with this number of days, which since that the two robbers besides on each side of Jesus, when he was wearing the crown of thorns, to the day it's predicted that Michelle Obama will be made the Queen of America. It's astounding. All right. So the recording just cut out 15 minutes ago. So in other words, there was 15 minutes of me talking without realizing that I wasn't recording anymore. And so I don't know where I really established this. So I'll just go through it one more time. It's worth it anyway, because it's so amazing. We have on this day the robbers dropping the queen's crown right near the Notre Dame, as in Our Lady Cathedral, known for its facade of Jewish kings, which is the place that's believed that the crown of thorns is housed, Jesus' crown, that he wore in between the two robbers at Golgotha. And the number of days between the dropping of the crown, the queen's crown, and the day Michelle Obama will be made the queen is a number that hints at Golgotha. So robbers, crown, Golgotha, and also it's predicted that her being made the queen will be a result of theft. Well, this proves it actually. That's the purpose of this. From the theft of the queen's crown, we get to the election through this profound connection of Golgotha, which proves that this upcoming referendum will be shoplifted. That's proof of this. Okay? Now, I know this for more reasons than just this, that this is the case. But this is how God's, or rather I should say, the purpose of this prediction that is from God is to prove that God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, is true. And the purpose of the big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is for God to demonstrate and prove these controversial things. And make no mistake, I know far better than you or anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction. It is to prove these controversial things through proving God's big picture of signs, which proves these things. And I have the authority to say that these things are the way they are because of this prediction, which will prove the matter, which will prove God's big picture of signs is true, which is only being explained on this channel. For example, the 2020 year referendum was shoplifted. If you didn't know that, you do now. Case closed. End of debate. No discussion at all. Zero. Period. And to not appreciate this is to not understand or appreciate the purpose of this prediction that is from God. Or this video channel. You might as well turn off the video now. This video isn't for you. You will not believe. The purpose for the prediction. The purpose of the prediction is not for you to go, oh, cool, neat. You knew that this was going to happen ahead of time. Oh, that's really cool. God showed you that. No. This isn't the purpose of the prediction. It's not for you to go cool and neat. Interesting. It is to prove the righteous Christian God of the Bible, but more than that, it is to prove the controversial things that God is demonstrating through his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. And I know more than anyone the reason and purpose for the prediction. Okay, so I'm going in a circle here. So the next paragraph will bring this subject up again, actually, because Napoleon I is symbolic of the Antichrist. He is, if you will, a lowercase a Antichrist figure. The famous Nostradamus, in his writings, described Napoleon as a type for the Antichrist. And whether you believe any of his prophecies are legitimate or not, it's not the point. It's irrelevant in terms of God's use of this figure in Nostradamus' writing as being an Antichrist. Because it's just symbolism, and God is entitled to do that, even if Nostradamus' writings were 100% fraud or false or a farce or confusion or whatever. But I don't believe that is the case. There are a few extremely exceptional instances in which that cannot be explained and are actually prophetic. Whether they're demonic or from God, it's not necessarily that important. The point is that they're real. There's a few of them. Just a small handful that I'm aware of. Okay? And but anyway, Napoleon is Antichrist symbolism. The crown that was dropped belonged to his nephew, Napoleon III's wife, the Queen. Napoleon III staged a political coup when he could not legally be re-elected. This is amazing because this is exactly what's been going on. This is what happened in the year 2020 when the referendum was shoplifted. The Antichrist emperor, by the way, Napoleon III proclaimed himself to be an emperor, the last emperor of France. The emperor Antichrist, Barack Obama, couldn't run for re-election. So he staged a political coup in which he installed with his henchmen the cognitively disabled stooge Biden. And essentially, Obama and the same administration was running the show during the Biden administration. Okay? And also, we are in the midst of an ongoing coup of the left, and the political cult is staging a coup. And also, there will be this issue of whether Barack will be entitled to run again for the White House. But actually, what's interesting is that this issue of the 22nd Amendment will already have been settled prior to Obama and Michelle running for the White House. Because the 22nd Amendment restricts someone from being elected more than twice. And it is Trump who will first take this to the courts and claim that he is eligible to run as J.D. Vance's vice president. That's what's going to happen. And this will set the stage and lay the groundwork for Barack Obama and Michelle to do the very same thing. When they step in an emergency after the Democrat Party nominee, Gavin Newsom, is predicted to die in a plane crash in August of 2028, which will create the space for Michelle to step in an emergency with Barack as her vice president. But it'll all be settled in the courts prior to this through Trump. And so what is not recognized by most people is that God is using Trump as a King Jehu, but it is symbolism. And he's also being used to lay down the groundwork for the Antichrist system. And this is a great example. Because Trump is essentially trumpeting the arrival of the Antichrist. I mean, if we think about it, the thing that he was associated with in his rise to political fame was for calling out Obama. And, for example, his fake forged birth certificate. This was years before Trump ran for the president in 2016. Trump was in politics, if you will, for essentially calling out the truth about Obama, who is the biggest liar, the wickedest, evil liar in history here. Now, also, Barack Obama is a communist. And once a communist, always a communist, unless they have a life-changing experience with Christ. But Barack Obama got into politics as a communist with the help of Bill Ayers, who wrote his autobiography, Dreams from My Father, and has said so publicly. It's not a conspiracy. Now, Barack Obama, while rising to the presidency, hid his true colors, but they will come out when he returns in an emergency and a crisis situation as the president. Because once a communist, always a communist. Now, like I said, this prediction that is from God will serve to prove that this is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. And it'll prove, the purpose of it is to prove the controversial things that I'm saying. Make no mistake. Barack Obama was a member of the May 19th Communist Organization when he was a youth, until it was disbanded in 1985, the year that he moved to Chicago to pursue political street activism in the city that his biological father did so as a communist, Frank Marshall Davis, who he got to know in Hawaii because Frank Marshall Davis went to Hawaii from Chicago to lead the communist the movement in Hawaii, which is how Barack Obama's grandfather got stationed in Hawaii, because he was an undercover CIA agent assigned to monitor the communist organization in Hawaii, which is how Frank Marshall Davis crossed paths with Barack Obama's grandfather's daughter, Barack Obama's mother, at the age of 18 and got her pregnant after he seduced her. And fearing the loss of his job at the CIA for having this having happened, he schemed to have the Barack Obama Sr. guy from Kenya, who was brought over in a CIA program to counter the communist movement in Kenya in order to study in Hawaii, convinced him to pretend to be the father of the child. Barack Obama Sr. agreed so that he could pursue his doctorate, which is, by the way, why we all know that Barack Obama Sr. and Barack Obama's mother never spent any time together, because it was a false, fake marriage. But they were very smart in one thing. They decided to have the baby in Kenya in order to fool immigration, to make the marriage look real. So Barack Obama was, in fact, born in Kenya. And it's interesting that I figured that out, because there is a documentary, The Dreams from My Real Father, which clearly establishes that Barack Obama's biological father is Frank Marshall Davis. But on the other hand, you have all of the overwhelming evidence, including in God's signs, which is what I'm focused on and will be proven to be true when the prediction comes to pass, that Barack Obama was indeed born in Kenya. I mean, the evidence that the prophetic signs that reveal that are overwhelming. It's case closed. There's no debate at all. Okay, and the birth certificate is a forgery, and that's proven through God's big picture of signs too. But furthermore, the sheriff of the sixth biggest county in the U.S. Had the forged document sent to the 2 forensic labs in Europe for an unbiased result, and they came back with the result of the document clearly being forgery, with 9 points of obvious forgery, which he then presented to the media in a press conference. And the local media in Phoenix covered it, but the national media didn't, and it's because the national media is wicked and in the tank for the Democrat Party. So you'll never hear that, and you'll also be brainwashed into thinking that what I just said is a conspiracy, but no, it isn't. Okay, but anyway, so there's the documentary that proves that Frank Marshall Davis is the biological father, and Barack Obama Sr. was the step in to pretend that he was the father for the purposes of saving Barack Obama's grandfather's job. By the way, ironically, Hawaii was the first state to legalize abortions, and had abortions been legalized at that time, Barack Obama the Antichrist would have never been born. And that's not a coincidence, that's just a coincidence that's designed by God. Okay, so anyway, so you got the two contradictory conspiracy theories, if you will, and both of them are conspiracy facts. They're not conspiracy theories, but they conflict. Well, the answer to that is that they took, or I should say they had the baby in Kenya for the purpose of fooling immigration. And here's the strange thing is that I did the very same thing when I was in Hawaii. And that's how I know. That's how it occurred to me. I began the steps, didn't follow through with it, of doing the same thing as a Canadian with a friend of mine there. This was back before I was born again. Okay, so anyway, that's the truth. Now, that was kind of not so necessary to go into right now. What I really wanted to go into is how Barack Obama was a member of the May 19th Communist Organization, because he was following in the footsteps of his father, Frank Marshall Davis, who was from Chicago, who was his mentor and idol, essentially. So that's how Barack Obama became a communist in the first place. It's through getting to know his father when he was a kid or a teenager in Hawaii. Okay, because he did have a relationship with his biological father when he was in Hawaii, which was sanctioned by Barack Obama's grandfather. Because Barack Obama's grandfather knew that Obama Sr. wasn't the real father. Okay, so anyway, Barack Obama was a member of the May 19th Communist Organization, which was responsible for bombing the Capitol building in 1983 on November 7th, 15 days after the Barrack bombings in Beirut. Barrack hints at Barack. This is from God. The Barrack bombings, that's how they're known. The Barrack bombings hint at Barack Obama. They're 15 days apart because 15 days is 2,160 hours. Barack Obama was born on the 216th day of the calendar year, which is 6 times 6 times 6. But the name Barack, as in Barrack bombings, as in Barack Obama, the name Barack is equal to 216 in English gematria. And that's why the 2,160 hours. Sorry, it's not 2,160 hours, it's 21,600 minutes. Same thing though, it hints at the number 216, which is the equivalent in gematria of the name Barack. And so from the Barrack, as in the name Barack, bombings, as in Obama, we have the number 216, which is the equivalent of the name Barack, to the May 19th Communist Organization bombing of the Capitol building, which is all symbolism, by the way, of Barack Obama taking over Washington as the Antichrist. But he was a member of the May 19th Communist Organization, and communists and communism is evil. I mean, literally, not just figuratively. It's evil, it's from Satan. Karl Marx was essentially a Satanist who hated God. And communists are interested in bringing down and destroying things, bringing down the system, burning it all up, and rebelling against God, essentially. So that's communism, and Barack Obama is a communist, a man full of hate. Probably goes back to his childhood when he didn't have a father and things like that. And his mother was obviously very lost as well. I mean, at one point she moved to Indonesia and joined a religious cult with a man from Indonesia after having been seduced by Frank Marshall Davis, the communist. Okay, so anyway, the point is that this is just scratching the surface of how I know through God's signs that Barack Obama was a member of the May 19th Communist Organization. And I don't have time to explain it all, and I've even gone way off more topic than I should have to elaborate on this Napoleon III figure that God has introduced into the prophetic signs here. But the point is that I don't need to go off onto a tangent and to explain everything. I have the authority to say these things. As a matter of fact, I have this authority. When this prediction comes to pass that is from God, it will prove the controversial things that I am saying. I did not need to go off on a tangent for 15 or 20 minutes to explain Barack Obama's history. He is a communist, and he was a member of the May 19th Communist Organization. Case closed. He started his politics with Bill Ayers, who was a communist, the founder of the Weather Underground terrorism outfit. Bill Ayers wrote the autobiography, Dreams from My Father, and this isn't a conspiracy theory. He's on video saying this. Okay? And that's because they concocted their dream in Chicago, which is where Bill Ayers is from, to have this presentable guy who speaks well, you could say. And their strategy, by the way, was to capitalize on the farce of him being from Kenya, because they both knew, and they've said this. Obama hasn't said this, but they knew that presenting Barack Obama as an African American would never get him to the White House. He had to be the son of an immigrant. That would make him different than other African Americans, unfortunately, because of prejudice. But that's why he really sold the fact that he was from Kenya. And that's why the book Dreams from My Father, when he takes this journey back to Kenya to just supposedly rediscover his roots and all that, they knew it was a lie. Barack Obama knew that Obama Sr. wasn't his real father. It was all a lie. Can you imagine how wicked you are to do that? To set out for the White House from the beginning and establish yourself as this guy that you aren't. So anyway, he goes back to Kenya pretending. That's why the relatives of Barack Obama hate him now, because he used them, and they know it. He doesn't talk to them. They didn't even get invited to the inauguration or anything. They were just a tool. And now it all makes sense to them. Now that they've heard the evidence for him having been born in truth to Frank Marshall Davis as his biological father, it all makes sense to them. How in the world could this man could totally have forgotten his family? It's because Barack Obama knows that they aren't his real family. They're not his blood. So that's why he's left them and doesn't talk to them, doesn't help them, nothing. Doesn't invite them to things, didn't even come to the inauguration. It's all a lie. Can you imagine that? This is how wicked this man is. Okay. So, that's what God's pointing to anyway with this Napoleon III guy through the dropped crown of his wife. Because he staged a political coup because he couldn't be legally reelected, which is what they did in 2020 with the shoplifted referendum. And he established himself as the emperor. Well, Barack Obama will become the emperor Antichrist. Now, this date, this October 20th date, is exactly 3 years and 3 months before the inauguration, when Obama and Michelle will return to the White House. And Obama will serve a third term, hence Napoleon III, and the 3 years and 3 months connection. Now, you might say, well, the heist was on the 19th, so why the 20th? Well, this is one of these exceptional cases where God is using a period of time in which the signs overlap and are not on just one date. So it's the 18th, 19th, and 20th with this same thing of kings, because the No Kings protest, for example, was on the Saturday, the 18th. The heist was on the 19th, and the reason why it was on the 19th is so that it could connect with the 20th, in order to connect with exactly 3 months and 3 years from the Napoleon III. So you have the bridge on the 19th with the heist, with the crown that was dropped near the Notre Dame Cathedral, known for its gallery of kings, etc., and the housing of the crown of thorns. And that's in between the No Kings protest and October 20th. Well, what happened on October 20th? Well, that was the day that Trump began the demolition of the White House, which was all part of these signs that pointed to Paul Simon, who sang about Graceland, the mansion, as in the White House mansion, owned by the king of rock and roll, who lived in Memphis, Tennessee, which is named after Memphis, Egypt. And the king's mansion is symbolic of a king's palace, and the king of Egypt in the Bible is symbolism for the Antichrist. Long story short. Now, there's so much more to October 20th, which is explained in the Trump demolition White House video. And I'll just put the thumbnail up right here now. You can watch this video, and I actually recommend that you, well, we're kind of already into this video. Maybe you should have watched this other video first. If you are really motivated and super keen, and you know where you're going to pause this video, maybe you could pause this video, go watch the other one and come back. But if you're not super keen like that, just continue watching this video, I guess, and then watch the other one after. All right, so here's the thumbnail for the other video. Okay, Paul Simon will fall October 31st. Will die November 5th. Trump demolition of White House. Obama will return to the White House January 20th, 2029. Trump and the White House demolition in the thumbnail. Okay, so again, just to summarize here, Napoleon III was pointed to because he is symbolic of a political coup and because he couldn't run again legally reelected, okay? It's all symbolism for Obama, who then declared himself to be the emperor. Obama will become the Antichrist emperor. And the third is confirmation for this 3 years, 3 months from the dropping of his wife's crown. And it hints at Michelle, who will be the queen, who will make Barack Obama the president again. Okay, now the robbers dropped the crown in the early morning after the No Kings protest the day before. And by the way, part of this No Kings protest includes the social media posts from the White House, involving one, for example, of Trump wearing a crown, flying an Air Force plane, and dropping poop on the No Kings protesters. Quite funny, quite funny. And all AI generated. Looks pretty real. And then there's another one, another AI, in which the Democrats are taking the knee. Okay, they're taking the knee after the Floyd, speaking of the No Kings protests, the Democrats in the Capitol building, in the hallway, in the foyer or whatever, they took the knee to commemorate how George Floyd died when his neck was kneeled on. The prosecutors said that his neck was kneeled on for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, which is why all of the protests took a ritual knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, including the Democrats in the capital of the nation. And the reason, prophetically, why it was 8 minutes and 46 seconds is because the first plane struck the first tower on 9/11 at 8:46 a.m. That's right. The truth is, spiritually, the kneeling protests for 8 minutes and 46 seconds were kneeling to Satan. They spiritually belong to Satan. Nancy Pelosi and the other Democrats that kneeled on that morning belong to Satan. That's why they kneeled. They didn't know it. I mean, they kind of do. They won't be surprised. In fact, that's how it works. When they die, they will know. It's not going to be a shock for people when they end up in hell. They'll all know exactly why they're there. They just pretend to not know right now. But they, anyway, are on their way to hell, and that's why they kneeled for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. It was symbolic of kneeling to Satan. Now, the reason for the kneeling also, prophetically, is the guy who started all of the Black Lives Matter protests, which were satanic, Colin Kaepernick. Kaepernick because it's used by God to point to the Nicolaitan doctrine of the church today that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth, and those that teach and have the works that are product of this doctrine. Well, anyway, he kneeled on September 1st, 2016, exactly 45 months before the big climactic moment of the 45th president's presidency, when he parted the ways of the BLM protesters and crossed the street and crossed Lafayette Park and then stood in front of the church that had burned the night before on Pentecost, which is symbolized by fire and is symbolic of the church, Pentecost, and held the Bible upside down to communicate the upside down displeasure of God with the American evangelical church that has the Nicolaitan doctrine. Colin Kaepernick. Anyway, the 1,288th word in the concordance is meaning to kneel, in rebellion against God. And that's why Colin Kaepernick kneeled 1,288 days before March 11th, 2020, Coronavirus Day, which led to the mark of the Antichrist, the thing that people took for that. And taking it is symbolic of kneeling to Satan. It's the tantamount to kneeling to Satan. That's why Colin Kaepernick, who began it all, kneeled 1,288 days, which essentially means kneeling to Satan. Kneeling and cursing God is what it means. That's what the word means in the concordance. And that's why adding 1,288 days got us to Coronavirus Day, which led to the mark of the Antichrist, which is tantamount to kneeling to Satan and cursing God, taking the mark of the Antichrist. Anyway, that's why the Democrats kneeled. Anyway, there's on the 18th, though, on the day of the No Kings protests, which hinted back at the Black Lives Matter Antichrist satanic protests, the No Kings protests, which were equally Antichrist and satanic. On that day, we had these two comedic posts from the White House, and the other one being Trump putting on a crown and a big king's robe in front of the kneeling Democrats in the Capitol building when they kneeled after the big weekend of the BLM protests. 7 days after the Pentecost climactic sign. And on that day of the burning of that church, that then the next day Trump went and visited after parting the protesters, Trump tweeted, "Law and order in Philadelphia now," and Philadelphia is one of the 7 churches, so hence the 7 days connection. And Colin Kaepernick wore jersey number 7. So Colin Kaepernick's kneel connects with exactly 45 months to the climactic moment of the 45th president's presidency when he parted the Black Lives Matter protests that Colin Kaepernick started with his kneeling before football games during the national anthem. And then 7 days later, because he wore jersey number 7, it was symbolically ritualized at the Capitol building for the whole nation. The whole nation, in other words, as a result, or at least half of the nation, I should say, kneeled to Satan through the symbolic kneeling of the Democrats for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, because it hinted at 9/11 when the first plane struck the first tower at 8:46 a.m. And Revelation 9/11 hints at, the events of 9/11 hint at Revelation 9/11, which is the verse that symbolizes, which is the verse of the king of the bottomless pit rising from the bottomless pit. That's Revelation 9:11. The king Antichrist, King Satan, King Apollyon. That's Revelation 9:11, which was pointed to through the events of 9/11. And through 8 minutes and 46 seconds with the kneeling. In other words, when they kneeled, they were paying homage to or pointing to Revelation 9:11 and the rising of the king from the bottomless pit. That's why the No Kings protest is in fact a rebellion against God's king and a kneel to their own king who rules the bottomless pit, who comes from the bottomless pit in Revelation 9:11. That's the truth of the matter. Wow, right? Wow, right? The No Kings protest is actually pointing to the king from the bottomless pit in Revelation 9:11. All right. Here we go. You can't see the whole screen, but unfortunately, it's exactly 280 weeks. Okay, because it's an inclusive count, and when God does weeks counts, it's often, more often than not, inclusive count. This is 280 weeks from the day that the Democrats kneeled during the BLM protests to the crown being dropped after the No Kings protests. And Trump posting a repost of the viral AI-generated video of him putting a crown on and then the Democrats kneeling in front of him. Why is 280 weeks extremely relevant? Because in God's signs, Trump is God's King Jehu, who ruled Israel for 28 years. Trump's reign will end in 2028, 28 years after he got onto the national stage when he ran for president in 2020, the first time that he ran for president. Trump is God's King Jehu, as Jonathan Cahn talks a lot about, and that's why the 280 weeks. 280 weeks is also 280 days times 7. 7 being God's signature number that indicates his divine touch upon something. 280 days is the equivalent of a human gestation period. And Jesus used this metaphor of birth pains when asked by his disciples for the signs to look for of his return. And so that's also what this symbolizes. We have from the day of the kneeling in the Capitol building to the viral post of Trump posting of them kneeling in the Capitol building, exactly 280 weeks, which is the number that hints at the king that they are protesting, God's king, King Jehu. And that's why they are protesting, because they are in rebellion against God, and Trump is God's King Jehu, which is why they have an irrational hatred for him. Now, who was King Jehu in the Bible? King Jehu, God sent, who wasn't a pious man, who wasn't a religious leader. He was a guy from nowhere, really, that God selected to do his work, which was to purge the nation of the unrighteous false religious worship and idolatry and sin, led by Jezebel, who in this paradigm was Hillary Clinton, and then subsequently Kamala Harris, in terms of symbolism. Jezebel led the Israelites into mixing the pagan religion with the true religion. And most importantly, led the worship of the god Molech through sacrificing babies on the fire of the altar of the god. Well, Planned Parenthood named Hillary Clinton the biggest advocate for abortion rights in history or something to that effect. And Kamala Harris was the first presidential candidate to visit during a campaign an abortion clinic. So she was also known as the biggest champion for abortion rights. And so that's why the 280 weeks here. This all occurred to me during the video, right? That's why I don't have this written out. That's why I have this, the screenshot that's not really working. But from June 8th, 2020, when they kneeled in the Capitol building, it is exactly 280 weeks to October 19th. And it is, but like I said, it's 100% relevant, but October 20th isn't an inclusive day count. It's exactly 280 weeks. And that's Kamala Harris's birthday, her 61st, and 61 is the 18th prime number, and 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And she, again, was the big symbol for Jezebel, which is all about King Jehu, who ruled Israel for 28 years. Hence the 280 weeks to Kamala Harris's birthday. Wow. Wow. And again, that was the day that Trump began the demolition on the White House, which is all part of this pattern pointing to Paul Simon, who sang about Graceland and the mansion owned by the king of rock and roll, who I just explained was symbolism for the Antichrist through the king of Egypt. Yeah, so so that's amazing. That's amazing beyond words. I think we should move on, though. Okay, so the robbers dropped the crown the morning after the No Kings protests, which the crown was dropped, again, next to the Paris River, very close to the Notre Dame Cathedral, which Trumpet King Jehu, which again is known for its facade of ancient Jewish kings, including King Jehu, Trumpet was at the Notre Dame Cathedral after he was re-elected, exactly 126 plus 126 plus 126 days, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, before October 20th, and the day he demolished the White House, to make way for the 44th semi-prime number room. Currently, the White House has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms, and it's located at 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue, because the 44th President Antichrist will dwell in the White House mansion, as in the Graceland King's Rock and Roll mansion and Antichrist symbolism. And now with the ballroom that Trump is building, it'll have 44th semi-prime number, which is 133 rooms. Anyway, 126, because it hints at 1,260, this number that's mentioned 7 times, is a period of symbolizing the period of the Antichrist in the end times. So Trump was at the Notre Dame Cathedral this extremely relevant amount of time, but also, as I'll say in a second here, 126 days is the equivalent of 18 weeks, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6 weeks. So what we have here is 3 sets of 6 plus 6 plus 6 weeks, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And 666 is the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. And the Notre Dame Cathedral hints at the Gallery of Kings, which is symbolic of the Antichrist king. Now, and also they were beheaded during the French Revolution, which is also Antichrist. This very bad, wicked moment in French history, which resulted in a politicide, which is what is coming in America, led by the Antichrist, a politicide against their enemies, true conservatives and true Christians. It's a genocide, but it's a politicide. That's what's coming. And that's what happened in the French Revolution, when they beheaded the statues of the Gallery of Kings, when they went crazy. Now, so we have this exact 18 plus 18 plus 18 weeks to the birthday of Kamala Harris, the 61st, and 61 is the 18th prime number. But Kamala Harris was the 49th vice president, and that's because this hints at the future 49th president, the Queen of America, Michelle Obama. That's why we have all these queen and king signs from the 18th, 19th, and 20th. Now, October 19th, 2025 was also the 61st anniversary of the release of Simon & Garfunkel's first album, Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m., that contains the song Sound of Silence. 61 is the 18th prime number, again, and 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And like I just said, 126 days is 18 weeks, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6 weeks, and Trump was at the Notre Dame Cathedral exactly 18 plus 18 plus 18, or 3 sets of 6 plus 6 plus 6 weeks, before the 18th, or 6 plus 6 plus 6 prime number birthday of the 49th vice president, which hints at the 49th president becoming the queen. Our Lady, Notre Dame. Michelle Obama, Our Lady. Trump was at the Notre Dame Cathedral on December 7th, 2024, 18 plus 18 plus 18 weeks exactly, before the 18th prime anniversary of Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m. The first album of Simon & Garfunkel. And that's relevant, as I'll explain here, but Wednesday morning, or Wednesday is the fourth day of the week, so this gives us a 4 and a 3, okay? And the 3 a.m. in the morning in ancient Israel was the beginning of the fourth watch, which is another 3 and 4. And that's because, as I explained elsewhere in other videos, Paul Simon is symbolism for the Hebrew idiom that's repeated in the Bible in the book of Amos for 3 transgressions and for 4, which means the tolerable limit of transgressions has been exceeded, and now judgment and destruction are unavoidable. That's what will be symbolized when Paul Simon dies. Now, December 7th, 2024 is exactly 20 plus 27 months, which hints at 227, which is the 49th prime number, before the election that will make Michelle the 49th president and the Queen of America. That's why Trump visited Notre Dame Cathedral, Our Lady, which is associated with Michelle Obama because she was right there when it burned, like I mentioned. And it's known for its gallery of kings. And that's why it connects with this number that hints at the 49th president to the day that she will be made the Queen of America as the 49th president. Okay? Now, Michelle infamously hugged the Queen of England in a faux pas. On April 1st, 2009, 1,656% of a year, of a calendar year, before the Queen's jewels were stolen and the crown was dropped in their escape. This is relevant because of what I'm about to explain. Now, from Adam to Noah, it was 1,656 years. That's why this number is prophetic. And you don't have to believe that it was literal. I don't. It's all a story that God used for, it's a myth that's true, in other words. It's all for the purposes of God. Now, anyway, Muhammad Ali, who, for his symbolism, Muhammad Ali, who consciously objected, he was known for consciously objecting to being drafted in the war, right? So Muhammad, and he almost went to jail because of it, and his boxing career suffered because of it. Muhammad Ali, who consciously objected, as in consciously objecting to the mark of the Antichrist, the thing, the S-H-O-T, Muhammad Ali, who consciously objected, died on the same day of the peak of the once in 200 years Paris river flood that flooded the Louvre Museum. That was June 2nd, 2016. Okay, that was the peak of the flooding. The peak in Paris was on the same day that the leaders of the nations gathered in Paris for the Middle East peace talks to talk about what to do about Israel without Israel attending the event and officially condemning the event, making that an extreme poke in the eye to God, because Israel is the apple of God's eye in Bible prophecy, and the world would come against Israel in Bible prophecy, as it says. But the peak of the flood of once in 200 years that was destructive in Paris and flooded the Louvre Museum was on the exact same day that the leaders attended the talks in Paris because of Genesis 12:3, where God tells Abraham, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And so when the nations gather to curse Israel, God curses them with the flood, symbolically there. There's a warning. God is going to do much, much worse than that soon. Okay, and so anyway, what I'm talking about here is that Muhammad Ali died on that day too, and he conscientiously objected. Now, this day, with the flood, and again, this number is flood symbolism, because again, from Adam to Noah and the flood, it was 1,656 years. Okay, so this day with the flooding was 1,656 days before the first injection thing, mark of the Antichrist, on December 14th, 2020. That's why it connected with the conscientious objector, Muhammad Ali, because people conscientiously objected and sacrificed their careers even. And that's the symbolic date of this thing, to not take the thing. They didn't take it, so they conscientiously objected. It's going to get much worse with the next round of the thing. But make no mistake, the thing was the thing. Okay, so again, the reason for this prediction in this video is to prove the controversial things that I'm saying, and it was the thing. It was the mark of the Antichrist in its current form. It did not need an additional something to go with it, such as an additional technology or false form of religious worship. In fact, for those who are wise, it did come with a false form of religious worship. And it does not need a supposed new age of dispensation after supposedly all quote-unquote Christians will be raptured. In fact, one of the main reasons why the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist is, in fact, it is a judgment for this particular doctrine, which is the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. And make no mistake, I know far better than you, the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God is to prove the things that I'm saying, including these things that are, that this is the thing. Case closed, end of debate, no more discussion. It is the thing. I'm, tired of repeating that in every video, but I guess I have to. Okay? And nowhere in the Bible does it say that one cannot repent. For the commonly held objections that people have based on their understanding of Bible prophecy, please know when the prediction comes to pass, it'll prove that you are wrong. But I answered those commonly held objections in the must-watch snake bite prophecy video on this channel. Okay. Now, so that day when the first thing was taken publicly outside of a trial was exactly 11 times 23 weeks before the theft at the Louvre. And God uses this because the 1123 is the 188th prime number. And God uses this frequently because H188 in Strong's Hebrew Concordance is the word for woe, exclamation mark, used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. And so this prophetic sign at the Louvre with the crown points to Queen Michelle and Barack Obama, who is the Antichrist, who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist, connects profoundly with this woe, exclamation mark number to the first thing. That's why it's a woe. And then in turn, it connects with the flooding number to the flood and the death of Muhammad Ali, who conscientiously objected. It's amazing. And again, the crown points to Napoleon III, who staged a coup and declared himself the emperor. That's why the connection with this woe number to the crown that pointed to Napoleon III, who staged a coup and declared himself the emperor. And had a queen, because it was the queen's crown, and hence Queen Michelle, who was on the river when the cathedral burned. That's known for its gallery of kings. Now, October 20th, 2025 is, or was, exactly 144 weeks, or 33 months and 3 days. And again, this hints at the Napoleon III, to this date here, January 17th, 2023, which was Michelle Obama's 17th prime number birthday, her 59th birthday. On this day, Comet E3, as in 33 months and 3 days, and Napoleon III, Comet E3 had its tail discombobulated by a solar flare from the sun, and it was right when it was moving through the Draco constellation, the dragon constellation. In Bible prophecy, the dragon sweeps a third of the stars from heaven to earth, which are symbolic of demons thrown down to earth. That's why E3 and the comet tail, because the tail of the dragon sweeps a third of the stars, and the comet was in the dragon constellation. 144 weeks, because this is the number in Bible prophecy that symbolizes those who will be rescued from the dragon, which the prophecy even talks about in Revelation chapter 12. There is a rescue. Actually, it's the rapture. It's symbolism for the rapture, the rescue of the child that was born by the woman in that Revelation chapter 12. But the number 144 symbolizes this. And that's why from this tail of the comet E3 that was discombobulated points to the third of the stars and then the rescue, right? Okay, now the 17th prime birthday of the 17th prime birthday of Michelle hints at the dragon, because the dragon in the prophecy has 7 heads and 10 horns. And 7 plus 10 is 17. But this day, which was the 17th of the month also, was exactly 17 weeks after another Michelle Obama story in the news, which was when it was announced that she was going to have a 6-city tour of her new book, Carrying the Light, which is like Antichrist, because Lucifer is the light bearer. Okay, it's 2 times 3 cities also. Barack Obama wore jersey number 23 in high school. But this is relevant because God pairs 23 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections, because the 44th president was the basketball president who wore number 23. And this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming matters the Bible says is required, and this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which God would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9 and 23 and 44. And I know this because I've been studying his big picture of signs from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years. And again, that's the reason. The 44th president was the basketball president who wore number 23. So from the 2 times 3 cities book tour, it is 4 plus 4 days to the death of Ken Starr. Excuse me. The last city, as in the end times, was Los Angeles, as in fallen angels. And Ken Starr hints at a star. Again, this connects to the star, the comet E3 prophetic sign. Now, Ken Starr was known, the big thing he was known for in his life was the investigator, special counsel investigating the 42nd president. The number 42 in a period of time in Bible prophecy symbolizes the period of the Antichrist. Okay, and Ken Starr died 6 plus 6 plus 6 weeks exactly to the star sign. Again, on January 17th, 2023, the comet E3 in the dragon constellation when its tail was discombobulated. Now, Ken Starr, which confirms this 6 plus 6 plus 6 weeks, was born 6,666 days before the birth of Kamala Harris, who was born the 6 plus 6 plus 6 prime number of years before October 20th, 2025, and the timing of the king's signs, including the dropping of the queen's crown, which pointed, because she's the 49th vice president, to the coming Queen of America, the 49th president, Michelle Obama, which will be 3 months and 3 years later, and they will serve a 3rd term. Comet E3, in other words, connects to the 3rd term of Barack Obama. It was in the dragon constellation. The dragon is symbolic of the Antichrist. Do you see what is going on here? Hopefully I made that all clear. If I didn't, just rewind it a bit and listen to it again, or just pause it and read what I wrote or whatever. But this is amazing beyond words. Yeah. These are the Michelle signs here too, by the way. These Michelle signs connect to this Napoleon III dropped crown queen sign next to the river, which, as I've established, points to Michelle Obama, who was on the river when the Notre Dame Cathedral, Our Lady, burned, known for its gallery of kings, and she will become the queen. That's why she was promoting her book, Becoming. But now we've tied in through Ken Starr and the day that she announced her book tour, Carrying the Light, Lucifer, and stars, of course, give off light. And her birthday on the dragon sign, and dragon hints at 17. It was her 17th prime birthday on the 17th of the month. It's amazing. And again, her birthday on the 17th of the month and her 17th prime number birthday was exactly 17 weeks after she had her announcement for the book tour, which was 6 cities, and this is in 666, ended in Los Angeles, Fallen Angels, the last city, End of Times. And 4 + 4 days as in the 44th president, after the death of Ken Starr, who was 6 + 6 + 6 weeks before Comedy 3. And also 6,666 days before Kamala Harris, the 49th VP, who was born 6 + 6 + 6 prime number of years before these Michelle Obama signs. In other words, with the dropping of the crown and No King's Protest, Gallery of Kings, Notre Dame Cathedral, and the demolition of the White House, which pointed to the Graceland Mansion and the King of Rock and Roll and all that. All Antichrist. It's amazing. January 20th, 2029 was 3 years and 3 months after October 20th, 2025, when Napoleon III's Queen's Jewels crown was dropped at the Louvre after it was stolen. And it's predicted, and this proves it, that Michelle and Barack Obama will arrive at the White House through a shoplifted referendum. Okay? Now, so this 3 years and 3 months connects to the dropping of the crown that belonged to Napoleon III, his wife, which in turn was 33 months and 3 days after the Michelle Obama, E3 sign, as I just explained. Okay, that's amazing right there. Now, also, October 20th, 2025, the 18th prime birthday of the 49th vice president, was 18 plus 18 weeks exactly after Trump visited Notre Dame, Our Lady, who will be the 49th president, Michelle Obama, who was at Notre Dame when it burned. That's amazing. October 20th, 2025 was the day that the Seattle Mariners, who play near the Space Needle, which is symbolism for the transhumanism technology, SHOT, that is the mark of the Antichrist, they lost the game 3-4, and they lost the series 3-4, which again hints at for 3 transgressions and for 4, the tolerable limit of transgressions being exceeded, and now judgment is unavoidable. And this day, the day that the Mariners, next to the Space Needle, lost 3-4, and the series 3-4, was exactly 340 weeks after Michelle Obama was at Notre Dame Cathedral when it burned. That is amazing. And this is all relevant too because it all is about Paul Simon, whose album Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. points to for 3 transgressions and for 4. And that's why the demolition at the White House on this day. That the Seattle Mariners, and Simon is known for being an avid baseball fan, the Seattle Mariners baseball team lost the game 3-4 and the series 3-4. Now, also, October 20th, 2025, the 6 + 6 + 6 prime number birthday of Kamala Harris was 360, as in 3 6s, as in 666, as in 36 = 6 × 6, and also 2 × 18, which is 6 + 6 + 6, and the 36th triangular number, which is in a triangle, the last number in the 36th row is 666, and 1 + 2 + 3 + 4 all the way to 36 equals 666. Okay, so this 6 + 6 + 6 prime number birthday of Kamala Harris was 360 days after, which is also incidentally, the 66 plus 6th prime number of days, 359, to October 26, 2024, when Kamala and Michelle Obama were in Kalamazoo, Michigan for a political rally. And that day was 22,700 days after Elvis was in Kalama near Seattle at the Space Needle. When he went there to film the movie, it happened at the World's Fair because the Space Needle opened for the World's Fair that year. Also, this 22,700 days is relevant because 227 is the 49th prime number, and Kamala Harris was the 49th vice president, and Michelle Obama is predicted to be the 49th president. That's why the two were together in Kalamazoo this number of days after Elvis, the king of rock, who, by the way, made the things popular with the baby boomer generation when he took the polio thing before he went on stage at the Ed Sullivan show, was at the Space Needle and this day when, but he stayed the night in Kalama, and then this Kamala and Michelle at Kalamazoo also connected to the birthday of Kamala here with this 666 number connection to her 6 plus 6 plus 6 prime birthday. Okay, so it's all amazing. And again, this day of her 6 plus 6 plus 6 prime birthday was also the day that the team from the Seattle Space Needle location lost the game. Which is further confirmation of the connection to Elvis in Seattle and the Space Needle. Which therefore connects Kamala to Michelle at Kalamazoo. In other words, this is a stunning confirmation here that the queen, because the crown was dropped, will enforce the mark of the Antichrist. The Space Needle. It's amazing. Now, another reason why it's the Space Needle is because the mark of the Antichrist, will be promoted by demons pretending to be aliens from space. And those on the left and those following Michelle, etc., will believe it. And they will promise the transhumanism technology, immortality. The first lie told to Eve, a woman, speaking of Michelle and Kamala, that she shall surely not die. And the big lie at the end of the age is the same lie. Through the mark of the Antichrist. The transhumanism technology. The thing. Okay, now, so October 20th, 2025 was the day after the 1,410 jewels on the Queen's crown were dropped. Okay, because it was a certain number of diamonds and emeralds that added up to 1,410. And that, in turn, was the day after the No Kings protest. 1,114 days after the 1,410 jewels were dropped is the predicted shoplifted referendum of Michelle and Barack. 141, which is what is hinted at, is the 4 times 4th semi-prime number. Also, 1,114 is the 927th composite number, which hints at Daniel 9:27, which is the last verse in the central prophecy in the Bible, which regards the period of the end times and the Antichrist. October 20th, 2025, the day after the stolen queen, 1,410 jewels, which hints at 4 times 4th semi-prime number, 4 robbers stole 4 plus 4 items. This is, or was, 4 times 40 weeks after September 26, 2022, which was the closest approach of Jupiter in 59 years to Earth. And that, in turn, was exactly 99 weeks after the 59th election that was shoplifted. And the number 9 is the most important number in God's sciences from the Bible. It symbolizes God's judgment. But what makes this relevant is the pairing. As I said, God establishes these pairings to confirm the signs and connections. And on the same day as the 59th shoplifted referendum, it was announced, trumpeted, that there were 230,000 deaths. That's a 23, which pairs with the 9. Because the basketball president was inaugurated in 09. And I know these are the numbers because, again, I've been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years. These are the building blocks of the God science. Because it's all about identifying the antichrists. Well, not completely, but the vast majority of God's science has this theme. And so the building blocks even of God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, involve these numbers that are about identifying the Antichrist. Also, the mark of the Antichrist is symbolized by 9 and 23, because the inverse of the mark is described in the 9th chapter of Ezekiel, and the mark of the Antichrist alters a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes. That's what makes it a mark. Their chromosomes are marked with snake venom, which is inserted into the chromosomes, which is the protruding amino acid in the thing, the SHOT. And the biggest symbol of evil in the Bible is the snake. Now, the thing also that confirms this is that from this 23, as in 230,000 deaths, after exactly 99 weeks, between the 59th shoplifted referendum and the closest approach of Jupiter, which symbolizes Christ in 59 years, and also symbolizes the church, another prior 999 weeks exactly prior to that is 9/11, which soon set Revelation 9/11, which symbolizes the demonic possession of those who take the mark of the Antichrist. And again is King Apollyon, which is the Antichrist king, the 44th president. Which is why, now going backwards, we have this 4 times 40 weeks exact connection to the 4 plus 4 items stolen by the 4 robbers, with the number of jewels that were dropped that equals 4 times 4th semi-prime number. Okay, I mean, that's amazing. From 9/11, it is 999 weeks to the 230,000 deaths on the day of the shoplifted 59th election, which connects with 99 weeks exactly to the closest approach of Jupiter in 59 years. By the way, that was also on the Feast of Trumpets, which is also prophetic in the Hebrew calendar. And that in turn was 4 times 40 weeks, and that also pairs with 23 and 9, because it's 9, 23, and 44 that pairs, like I said. So this pairs with the 99 weeks, this 4 times 40 weeks, and the 230,000. This is amazing, and it gets us to the 4 plus 4 items stolen by the 4 robbers, and the 4 times 4th semi-prime number of jewels that were dropped in the crown. Wow. In other words, this proves, especially when the prediction comes to pass, that the 2020 referendum was shoplifted. I mean, it's actually a ridiculous thing to say, because it's like only a fool doesn't know that. But there are so many fools that have been fooled. I mean, it was very easy to learn this, right? It's not even a complicated thing. Had you been interested in the truth, you wouldn't have been consuming mainstream media. That's why, for example, the quote-unquote Christians that have taken the mark of the Antichrist, that trusted the mainstream media, deserved it. Because they weren't crying out for justice and righteousness, which, as mentioned and alluded to in the, not alluded to, but is part of who did and didn't receive the mark in Ezekiel chapter 9. The inverse of it. Those who got the mark were saved. And those were the ones who were crying out for justice and righteousness in Jerusalem. If someone were crying out for justice and righteousness, they would have known decades ago that the mainstream media is in the tank for the left, which is wicked and is lying, and it's gotten progressively worse over the decades, and it's to the point where it's satanic now. And you should have known that. If you didn't know that, there's no excuse for you. And if you were not following and consuming mainstream media, you would have known the overwhelming evidence, the parade of evidence that was, for example, paraded in front of the state legislatures for the shoplifted referendum. Had you been following, had you been interested, and if you were crying out for justice and righteousness, you would have been interested. Just like you would have been interested in hearing those who have the Holy Spirit, your brothers and sisters in Christ, that were telling you that it is the mark of the Antichrist. Instead of you blocking it out because you didn't want to hear the truth, because you wanted to keep your job or go on a vacation. It's judgment. And I'm sorry, it seems to me like you deserved it. Now, there's nowhere that it says you can't repent. Okay, so anyway, this set of connections in this line right here, this paragraph, is truly profound. And it proves everything, right? By the way, the 999 weeks also pairs with the 44, because the fourth plane crashed at a 40-degree angle into a 40-acre pit, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, and killed 44 people. And in Revelation 9:11, it symbolizes the rising of the demons from the bottomless pit, which is why that 44 on 9/11 connects with this 999 weeks to the taking of the mark of the Antichrist, with the 230,000 deaths. Which is a pairing of 9 and 23, which pairs with this 99 weeks exactly to the closest approach of Jupiter in 59 years, which this 99 and then in turn compares with the 4 times 40 weeks. Wow. To the 4 plus 4 items stolen by the 4 robbers, and the 4 times 4th semi-prime number of jewels dropped, which points to the queen who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist. And who will come to power through a shoplifted referendum. Okay? Because the only reason why they didn't shoplift the last election is because of God. And it was just overwhelming. The victory was overwhelming. They couldn't. But in the upcoming one, it'll be closer and they'll be able to shoplift it, like they did in the year 2020. By the way, when Biden was campaigning, you know how they have on the podium text this number to donate? Well, the number was 30303 and then 2020. But if you divide 2020 by 30303, you get 666. You get 0.066666. Okay. And that was a clue. Spiritually, I mean, it's a clue that Biden was representing Satan and bringing in the Antichrist. Barack Obama. Now, where were we? Let's move on to, we're getting closer to the end here. Well, I think anyway. So, October 21st, it's reported that Trump is suing the Department of Justice for $230 million that he will donate to the White House ballroom construction. And the demolition began the day before. October 21st is 9 days to the date it's predicted that Paul Simon will fall. And it's predicted it'll be reported in the news first on the following day. Prior to this, I had suspected that perhaps that God was also pointing to October 30th, and therefore Simon would fall on that day, and then the news, we would hear about it on the 31st. So I think this is more likely the case now. If not, Paul Simon will fall on the 31st. But it's interesting that we have 9 days from the $230 million sign, which makes sense because, again, God pairs 9 and 23. So if we have this $230 million sign right here, and it is a sign because it's, for one thing, attached, connected to the White House ballroom, which we know is prophetic. And by the way, it's a pairing of 44 and 23 because the ballroom will be the 44th semi-prime number room of the White House. So that in itself makes it prophetic. But it would make sense that we are given this for a day count connection. And 9 days gets us to the 30th, not the 31st. And the White House mansion is about the Graceland mansion, which is about Paul Simon. And vice versa, actually. And so that's why I think Paul Simon will fall on the 30th. And instead, it'll be reported on the 31st. That's what I think now. So the top headline on Drudge Report is a New York Times article published on October 21st about Trump suing his own government for $230 million. 9 days later is October 30th. I have been wondering if Simon will fall on October 30th, and the news will be reported on the 31st. The night of October 29th to the 30th is when Comet 3I Atlas will reach perihelion, in other words, closest to the sun. Trump said he would donate the $230 million to the White House ballroom. A mansion equals Simon, October 21st, 9 days, Simon's will fall instead of the 31st. Okay. The ornate gold piece, which is the crown, which features 1,354 diamonds and 56 emeralds, was damaged in the heist, prosecutors said. Okay, so this is where we get this number I mentioned earlier with the 1,410 jewels, because when you add them together, the 4 robbers robbed 4 plus 4 items. They dropped the 9th one. The Notre Dame Cathedral roof burned for 9 hours and was known for this. It took so long for it to be put out. And 9 is the number that symbolizes judgment. It was judgment on the church. It was a warning of judgment for the church. And so the 9th one was dropped basically right near the place where the roof burned for 9 hours. And it was the Queen's crown. And again, Michelle, who was promoting her book Becoming, when the cathedral Our Lady burned, and she will become the Queen. And Michelle hugged the Queen of England. And the Paris River is the location that inspired Paul McCartney to write the song Michelle. And McCartney was knighted by the Queen that Michelle hugged in a faux pas. Exactly 6 times 6 times 6 weeks after the faux pas. No. After she was at the cathedral when it burned. The faux pas was 3,666 days before the cathedral burned, and she was promoting Becoming. And that day was 6 times 6 times 6 weeks before the Encore plane crash. Faux pas and Encore are French, and was the plane owned by the company named Encore, in which the pilot passed out because he had taken the mark of the Antichrist and suffered a heart condition, a heart event, and fell unconscious at the controls. And so the plane was just cruising with passengers in it without being able to be flown, and then crashed. But it flew right over restricted airspace over the Capitol building in the White House, which caused the scrambling of jets and a sonic boom over Washington. It was the Encore plane crash. That's because Michelle and Barack will have an encore at the White House, and she'll become the Queen, which is why she had a faux pas with the Queen. And again, McCartney was knighted by the Queen, and his song was inspired when he spent time in Paris at the river there, at the Bohemian scene at the river at that time. Okay. And again, also, McCartney sang at the White House to Michelle and Barack the song Michelle. Okay. By the way, the day that, speaking of Encore plane crash, Michelle will become the president through a plane crash, as I explained. Gavin Newsom is predicted to die in a plane crash, and she'll be stepping in an emergency. So that's another reason for the Encore plane crash. But also, McCartney sang Michelle to Michelle at the White House exactly 6 years before Barack Obama delivered a commencement speech to the Air Force Academy, and right when he spoke, number 6 in the squad of the Thunderbirds crashed. That was the same day that the number 6 in the squad of the Blue Angels crashed in the 4x4th state, and the pilot was killed. Both of the crashes, Thunderbirds and Blue Angels jets are not known for crashing. They're precision jets, ceremonial jets. They're flown by highly skilled pilots. But both number 6 in their squad crashed that day when the 44th president was at the Air Force Academy, as in plane crashes, and Blue Angels hints at Obama too because his favorite basketball team is the Blue Devils, college basketball team, and it was a fallen angel because it fell. The Blue Angels jet fell, but the two number 6 in their squads fell exactly 6 years after McCartney sang Michelle to Michelle and Barack at the White House. And Michelle will become the president in the White House due to a plane crash, which will bring in her husband, the Antichrist, whose number is 666. That's amazing. You know what? I just realized that just now. I have to be honest. Because I'd always wondered where the other 6 was. Because I knew the 2 jets were number 6 in their squads, but we're missing a 6. But I just looked up the McCartney date last night, and now it just occurred to me. It was exactly 6 years, and that gives us the 666. But it's irrelevant because Michelle will become the 49th president after the 49th president and Gavin Newsom are predicted to die in a plane crash together. And that's how she'll get back to the White House. The encore of Michelle and Barack as the Queen, which is why the Queen knighted McCartney and why he was inspired to write Michelle when he was at the Paris River in the Bohemian scene. Wow. I basically just created another video there. I mean, that's a huge revelation there. Hopefully you made it this far. Of course, the wise person will recognize that when the prediction comes to pass, that they need to watch every minute of every video on this channel. And intently. Well, anyway, the robbery was a 7-minute robbery. And the robbery is known for how quick it happened. So it's an emphasis on this 7 minutes. Okay? And that's a hint at the 7 symbolic years of the tribulation, which is only symbolism. And we are already in the final 7 years. And when the prediction comes to pass, its purpose is to prove the controversial things that I am saying. And so therefore, those that are still looking for a supposed beginning of the precise 2,520 days or whatever, stop. You're wasting your time. And your time is the most valuable thing you have. You can do other things for the Lord. We are already in the 7 years and it is only symbolic. Stop looking for the beginning of the 2,520 days. Okay, now this is amazing. There was the flash flood in Kenya, right in southwest Kenya, where Barack Obama was born, in the Hell's Gate Canyon National Park. More Antichrist symbolism. It's also the location, incidentally, that literally inspired the movie The Lion King, which is why God uses the movie The Lion King to point where Barack Obama was born. And so that was a Lion King movie sign, but the flash flood was also on the day that the Pope got stuck in the elevator for 7 minutes due to a power outage. That day was also exactly 4 times 40 years after the Carrington event. And what's coming is a big power outage caused by the sun. But anyway, that day was also the day of the Simba Cam at the Washington Nationals baseball stadium, in which the 2 players that were lifted up were player number 2 and 22. And it was in Washington, and Washington was born on the date 222, George Washington. And that was the year that the Washington Nationals won the World Series, and on, prophetic. Anyway, that Simba Cam, which was a Lion King sign because Simba is the protagonist in the movie, and at the beginning he's lifted up as the baby. So the Simba Cam is in stadiums when the fans will lift up their baby or pet for the camera for everyone else in the stadium to see. So that was, and it was a big joke. The players jokingly lifted each other up, but it was number 2 and 22 in Washington. But it was on the date 19, or rather September 1st, 9/1 in the year 19, as in 19, which into 9/11, and through the 9/11 events, God pointed to Washington, who was born on the date 2/22. Well, anyway, this date that the Louvre heist happened was on the date October 19th, which also hints at 9/11. And it was a 7-minute heist, which is why it occurred to me to check a connection to the 7-minute power outage in the Vatican, the home of the first of the two Antichrists, because Barack Obama is the second of the two. And sure enough, there's a connection. And I didn't even realize that both of those dates hint at 9/11. And it's relevant in the first case because it's Washington. And through the 9/11 events, God pointed to Washington. Okay, we had a Washington sign. Okay, well, anyway, the 7-minute power outage connects to the 7-minute heist with exactly 320 weeks. Well, that's relevant because the name Obama is equal to 32 in English gematria. Sorry, simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. And 32 is also equal to the word bomb. And that's another subject, but let me see. God is pointing to an upcoming dirty bomb in New York City, or two of them actually. And I don't know yet if this 7-minute heist connects to that. I don't see why it would anyway. It's not really a bomb sign, so never mind. But anyway, 32 is equal to Obama. And that's why this is relevant. Because these are Obama signs. Because again, Obama was born in southwest Kenya, which is the point of that sign. The two signs on that date pointed to the two Antichrists. All right, the one in the Vatican and the flash flood in Hell's Gate Canyon in Kenya, where the second of the two Antichrists was born. And Barack Obama infamously used the clips from The Lion King, the Simba scene of lifting up, to say that this is the place of his birth. And he did that as a joke shortly after he released his long-form birth certificate forgery. In other words, he made a joke. He made a joke about the biggest lie in history. And that's an example of how cunning and skillful he is as a liar. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. There are 28 statues of ancient Jewish kings on the Facade of Kings, or Gallery of Kings, on the Notre Dame Cathedral. This is because King Jehu ruled for 28 years. This is the reason why Trump visited the Notre Dame Cathedral after he was reelected. Trump is God's King Jehu. Trump first ran for who was sent to purge, and that's why the headlines in the media are constantly, Trump purges this, Trump purges that. It's because King Jehu was the purger in ancient Israel. Trump first ran for president in 2000. He is predicted to be assassinated 28 years later in 2028. This period is 28 years. And this mirrors King Jehu's reign of 28 years, which will be the end of his reign as God's King Jehu. That Trump will be assassinated is the reason why the statues on the Facade of Kings were beheaded during the French Revolution. Trump will be assassinated in the political left's ongoing coup and political revolution. The No Kings protests on the day before the Louvre heist and the dropped Queen's crown was a demonic manifestation of the spiritual enemy's hate of God's King Jehu, Trump, and of God himself. The Gallery of Kings is known for how the heads of the statues were beheaded during the French Revolution. The dropped Queen's crown at the Louvre on October 19th pointed to the Gallery of Kings on Notre Dame Cathedral, which Trump visited exactly 6 + 6 + weeks earlier. On this same day that the Queen's crown was dropped during the robbers' escape, the FBI reported that a sniper's stand was discovered that had a direct line of sight to Trump's Air Force One at the airport in West Palm Beach. Okay, so that's what I'm getting at here is this sign here of the sniper's nest occurred in conjunction with this sign that pointed to the Notre Dame Cathedral, which has a gallery of kings that were beheaded and are known for that. All of this, in other words, points to the coming assassination of Trump after 28 years as God's King Jehu. On the day of the assassin's nest discovery, and it was announced, I should say, on the day that the assassin's nest was announced, the robbers stole 9 items and dropped the Queen's crown. The date on which the 9 items were stolen, on October 19th. This is 1,011 days before it is predicted that Trump will be assassinated on July 26th, 2028. This is also, okay, so let me just say here that the 9 items on the date 10/19, that's a bunch of 1s and 9s, and it's 1,011 days, a bunch of 1s, to the date Trump is predicted to be assassinated. It's all 9/11 symbolism. And Trump famously called into Channel 9 News on 9/11 and inadvertently trumpeted that his tower in Lower Manhattan had become the tallest tower. So Trump is a 9/11 sign in himself. That's why the 9/11 symbolism between this date that hints at 9/11 and his predicted assassination. But on the date that hints at 9/11, and the 9 items that were stolen was the day it was announced that the sniper's nest had been discovered, which hints at Trump's assassination, 1,111 days later. See how profound it is? Okay. This is also 276.99% of a year, and this rhymes with the date, 7/26, when he's predicted to be assassinated, and the 9 stolen items, in addition to the 9-hour Notre Dame Cathedral fire, which the 9 stolen items hinted at. The reason for this 1,011 days connection to Trump's predicted assassination from the date 10/19, when 9 items were stolen, is that it hints at 1,119 days connection from the flooding in the 28th state to Trump's predicted assassination. What do I mean? Okay. Well, on October 5th, 2017, Trump cryptically said to the media, quote, "This is the calm before the storm," unquote. Trump is God's King Jehu, who ruled for 28 years. October 5th, 2017 was 2,828 days before the storm in the 28th state. On July 3rd, 2025, which did the destructive and deadly flooding in the early hours the following morning on the 4th, America's birthday. Now, this storm in the 28th state, which was 28 days after Trump said the calm before the storm, this July 3rd date is 1,119 days before Trump's predicted assassination, which is also hinted at with this connection with the 1s and 9s here. Now, H1119 is the word in the Hebrew Concordance that means knee. During Trump's assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, Trump dropped to his knees. Okay, now this is from a website talking about this word in the Hebrew Concordance, which means knee. The knee is consistently presented in the Bible as the hinge between creaturely frailty and divine majesty. When the knee bends, it announces dependence, humility, worship, surrender, or, when it refuses to bend, rebellion. The 12 New Testament occurrences of this word mark critical moments in the life of the Lord Jesus, the growth of the early church, and the climactic promise of universal homage. Okay? So that's the significance of this word knee. Now, why is this relevant to Trump? The English word butler comes from the French surname Botelier, which is derived from bouteille, which means bottle. And Boutelier, the surname, is someone who is in charge of bottles. Okay? This is derived from the role of the cupbearer to a king. That's why a butler is like the servant to the master, right? It's all rooted back into the cupbearer, the bottle guy, if you will, of a king. Such as in the Bible, Nehemiah, who was the butler, if you will, the cupbearer to the king Artaxerxes. Now, the cupbearer's job was to protect the king. The reason why he was called the cupbearer is because he would sip the wine first to make sure it wasn't poisoned. So he was the most trusted guy, the butler, like a butler for a master, right? So the cupbearer is the protector of the king. What I'm getting at is that God is Trump's protector, which is why the assassination attempt in Butler. But get this, in the Bible, a priest was consecrated for God's work with a blood ritual involving applying blood to the right ear, right thumb, and right big toe. This is the order in which Trump was bloodied in Butler, right? He was shot, grazed the ear, then he immediately put up his right hand and first used his right thumb to touch the blood, and then went down on his knees, but in the process also got blood on his toe, which is why we know him saying before leaving the stage, "Where's my shoes? I need my shoes." His shoes came off somehow, miraculously, and his foot was bloodied. Okay, and then after this ritual, for 7 days, 7 days later, the priest was ordained. 7 days after Trump was bloodied in Butler, Trump accepted the nomination at the Republican convention, which was symbolic of Trump being ordained by God for his work. And it was 7 days because, okay, a shooting, a day in Hebrew, begins at sunset. And the shooting was during the day on the 13th, okay? So 13th day 1, 14th day 2, 15th day 3, 16th day 4, 17th day 5, 18th day 6. But the convention, when he accepted the nomination, was after sunset. So after sunset on the 18th, day 7. Okay. The 7-day ritual was completed on July 18th, like I just explained. But this date was exactly 70 plus 70 plus 70 weeks, or is exactly 70 plus 70 plus 70 weeks before Trump is predicted to be assassinated on July 26, 2028, thus completing the 28-year reign of God's King Jehu. And again, Trump was inaugurated when he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old, 73 days, as in 3 sets of 7, after he won the election by 77 electoral votes, on the same day, incidentally, that Netanyahu had been in office for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. And that day was exactly 73 weeks, as in 3 sets of 7, after Trump descended the escalator in Trump Tower. And that was symbolic of the anointing of King Jehu, after which he descended the staircase on the mountain. Yes. And King Jehu was known for destroying the temple of Baal in the Bible, which is why in that summer, just shortly after Trump descended the escalator, ISIS blew up the temple of Baal in Palmyra, Syria. Also, the day Trump descended the escalator was exactly 188 months after the 7.0 earthquake in Joshua Tree, California. The walls of security of Jericho were collapsed in God's judgment due to an earthquake after Joshua led the Israelites in a symbolic 3 sets of 7. They marched around 7 days, once per day for 7 days, and then in the 7th day, they marched around 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. Which is why Trump was inaugurated as God's trumpet when he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. But he will also, or it's predicted that he will be assassinated 70 plus 70 plus 70 weeks exactly after God anointed him for his work at the convention 7 days after there was an assassination attempt in Butler and butler means protector, as in God protecting Trump on that day for his work. One very important thing that wasn't mentioned is that the heist at the Louvre was in the Apollo Gallery. Apollo is the same name as Apollyon in Revelation 9:11, King Apollyon, which serves to prove what I have been saying here, is that this Louvre heist points actually to the Notre Dame Cathedral with its facade of kings, in order to point to Michelle Obama and Barack Obama as the King Antichrist, representative of King Apollyon in Revelation 9:11. Actually, it's even more specific than this, because the heist was in the Apollo Gallery, and the proper term or name for the facade of kings is the Gallery of Kings. All right, so the following posts, I should say, by Trump, God's trumpet, and also J.D. Vance, as in Trump Vance, as in trumpets. Further play on the trumpets, but Trump Vance is another play on trumpets. Anyway, the posts from these two reposts are prophetic. On October 18th, which was the day of the No Kings protest, and their reposts were in regards to this theme of the No Kings protest and essentially the spiritual rebellion of the protesters against God's King Jehu. So just watch these clips and then I'll be back. Trump and Vance's No Kings protest posts on October 18th are prophetic. Trump is God's King Jehu, who ruled for 28 years. The Democrats kneeled for 8 minutes and 46 seconds in the Capitol building, which pointed to 9/11, when the first plane struck the first tower at 8:46 a.m. On June 8th, 2020, exactly 280 weeks, which since that King Jehu, who ruled for 28 years, before the dropped crown from the heist in the Apollo Theater at the Louvre Museum that pointed to the 28 kings in the Gallery of Kings. The Apollo Gallery and that pointed to the heist in the Apollo Gallery that pointed to the 28 kings in the Gallery of Kings at the Notre Dame Cathedral. King Apollyon, as in Apollo Gallery, is mentioned, described in Revelation 9:11, which is why the connection of this 280 weeks, which since at the Gallery of Kings and the 28 kings on the Gallery of Kings and Trump's post, who is King Jehu, who ruled for 28 years, it's exactly 280 weeks after the Democrats kneeled and pointed to 9/11, which hints at Revelation 9:11. And King Apollyon, as in Apollo Gallery, 280 weeks later. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.